Welcome everybody to our sleep issues workshop. I'm really excited about this workshop because I know I'm going to do a great job. Either I'm going to give you great information so that you'll be able to tonight actually go to sleep and get a great night's sleep, or I'm going to bore you and you're going to fall asleep and then you're going to get more sleep that way too. So either way, we're in good shape. I just want you to know that this is a very real subject, and sleep affects so many things, and more people are struggling with sleep issues. So let's unpack this subject so that you can learn what's going on, how is it linked, and what are the best practices, and some things that you've never heard before we may be sharing with you tonight, of understanding what are things that can get in the way of sleep, and including things you can do on your own. All right. Let's advance. There we go. So the proper amounts of sleep on a consistent basis have these benefits: anti-aging, anti-inflammatory, it prevents mood disorders and dementia, it promotes a healthy BMI. Wow, how many people struggle with their weight, or they want their ideal body and they don't know that getting good sleep could actually be the answer for them. It also is protective against neurodegenerative disease, protective against arthritis. It supports the immune system. It protects the cardiovascular system. It is anti-carcinogenic, and it actually helps to prevent musculoskeletal injuries as well. So many things are important here. And I actually just came back from an airplane trip. And so I know jet lag is another factor that we have to include in these days of things that can affect our sleep. So I'm also going to share with you best practices if you are a traveler and you cross time zones, and how jet lag can affect you as well. So a few interesting fun facts. Cats will sleep about 2/3 of their entire lives, whereas humans, it's 1/3, right? So cats get a lot more sleep than we do. It's also interesting that divorced, widowed, and separated people will report more insomnia. Sometimes people are surprised at that because they think, oh, what if you have a partner or a spouse that is a noisy sleeper or jostles you in bed? But no, actually, more insomnia for people that do not have that long-term relationship. Sleep deprivation, it actually can kill you more quickly than food deprivation. That's important to get the ranking of that, right? Mm-hmm. Humans are the only mammals that willingly delay sleep. We're the only ones that do that, right? No other species on the planet willingly delays their sleep when it's time for them to sleep. Sleep is just as important as diet and exercise, even at the genetic level. What our cells demand of us at the genetic level includes sleeping a certain way. Ideally, falling asleep at night should only take you 10 to 15 minutes. So your head hits the pillow, within 10 to 15 minutes, you should be sleeping. I had a child in the practice the other day that told me that his dad fell asleep in 13 seconds. So, when you're working hard during the day, you can sleep easily at night. That's one of the factors. So we'll show you that. 36% of Americans drive drowsy or fall asleep while driving. That's 36%. That's 1 in 3. Mm-hmm. Think about being on the road and 1 in 3 of those cars may be somebody that could be drowsy. According to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, about 40 million people in the United States suffer from chronic long-term sleep disorders each year. So there are those that fall asleep, occasionally, that have sleep trouble occasionally. And then there are those that have chronic long-term sleep disorders. And that's a lot of people. And so maybe 20 million have occasional sleep problems, but 40 million, double that, actually have the chronic problems. So if you're one of these people, you know what a nightmare it is when you have sleep problems. And, besides tossing and turning, stiffness in your neck and back, racing thoughts, sleepwalking, restless legs, you may also suffer from a variety of problems during the day. And let's look at those, because after a bad night's sleep, right, and the issues we're going to look at are the sleep apnea, thoracic outlet, and restless leg as well, because those are the ways certain things will present in my office that I want to cover, that besides just having the best practices for the best sleep habits. So if you do have bad habits, they are what accumulate and lead to us then having symptoms and conditions. So it's the accumulation of the bad habits and the poor lifestyle habits that over time is what the problem is. So you may have a stressful event that occurs now and then, a loss of a job, a loss of a loved one, a concern that's, one-off. But it turns out it's the accumulation of the 10,000 bad choices we may make at any point during a day. It's the accumulation of those that actually leads to bigger problems. And not getting good sleep is a symptom of something going on, that your body is saying, I need change here. I'm moving away from health. So if your body has signals or symptoms, it's your body's way of communicating with you. And so when your body communicates with you, if you listen and respond, we want to watch how you do that, because many people, instead of listening and responding, they just try to mask that symptom. Oh, I'm not getting good sleep. Can you give me a drug that's going to help me with that? And so then they, instead of trying to change what the cause of the problem is, they just live around it in some way. And living around it doesn't necessarily improve that function and get to the cause. So typically when a symptom or a condition shows up, it's the tip of the iceberg of something bigger that's happening underneath. And so we want to make sure we're addressing what the cause is and how do we correct that at the cause level. So if you, and so again, just putting this on a range, a reference range, symptoms are important because they tell us what direction we're heading. They tell us if we're moving away from health. But this continuum here is a useful piece to us for framing where does poor sleep fall on this range. So when we looked at this was from a study that was done 3 times that showed that there's a range of where people fall at any moment in time on this illness-wellness continuum. So there are some people that are at high levels of wellness. There are some people that are heading towards early death. And then there are people that are kind of right in the middle. And so they're not necessarily as healthy as they could be, but they're not necessarily showing any signs or symptoms. So we call this neutral point false wellness. So there's healthy and then there's sick. And then this is the not sick zone where people don't necessarily have symptoms, but they're not necessarily robustly healthy. When we use the word health, this is the way I want to be using it, robustly healthy, not just not being sick. And if you are living here and thinking that it's health, you're actually very close to losing function. As you lose function, there will be signs that you're moving in that direction. And then the signs come first, and then the symptoms start to show up. And then when the symptoms are no longer manageable, that's when you're in a disability state as you continue to lose function. So I show you this because I want you to think to yourself, where am I right now on this illness-wellness continuum? Everybody's going to be somewhere on here. If you already have some symptoms, even if you're managing those symptoms with medication so that you don't feel them, if they're still there without the medication, then that means you're actually in this category right here. And so think about where are you right now on this continuum? And then the next question is, what direction are you heading? Because everybody is going in one direction or the other. Nobody's standing still. That's what the research showed us. No one's standing still. And everybody's moving in that direction at a different velocity. There's a speed to moving in one direction or the other. And there's some momentum that is part of that as well. So for me, my job when I work with people, sometimes my first job is just to slow down the momentum moving in the wrong direction and get things turned around and then start to move things in the right direction. So whoever comes in for care with me, my job is to just get them moving towards that higher level of wellness, which is what their goal is. And that's what my job on the team is to turn things around. So that's the perspective now with what symptoms are and how they relate to your overall health. So let's set some ground rules here, because the way that you think about this will determine how you deal with it. So as I said, there are some people, I'm not sleeping well. And so they're thinking the problem is I'm not sleeping well, but if I took a medication that helped me to sleep, that's going to solve my problem. And so we have to have some ground rules that'll help us to think about what direction do I want to head in? And so let's go over what I think the best ground rules are that are going to set you up for ultimately moving towards that higher level of wellness. So the better premise that we need, rather than just mask the problems, first is to acknowledge that healthy is normal. And so healthy sleep is also normal. It may be common for people to have trouble sleeping, but that's not healthy normal. So healthy is normal. And your body is smart. It was designed to be healthy. And it actually has all the mechanisms in place to get great sleep. And if you are, if the lifestyle choices you're making are interfering with that great sleep, your smart body's just trying to manage that extra stress. So if your body is smart, it means the signals that it's sending us are something that we want to pay attention to and respond to. And here's the next premise that's really key, which is the nervous system is the master system that's in charge of controlling every other function in the body. The brain controls everything. It has to get the messages through the spinal cord, out through the nerve roots to get to every cell. And as long as the messages get from the brain to the cells and back again without interference, you get to be healthy. But if there's any disturbance of the flow of messages in the nervous system, that will alter the function in the body. Nervous system is the master system. The spine is your suit of armor that protects your nervous system. And then this last one, that modern life is unnaturally stressful. It just is. And when you talk to anybody about comparing their stresses that they had, maybe 3 years ago compared to even today, right? The stresses are there. And we are living in a very unnatural way. And so if you're stressed, right, then let's look at what does stress do? And we're going to look at there are 3 dimensions that these stresses are coming at us from. So the first dimension is the thoughts. So everybody, when they think of stress, they often think of, oh yeah, you mean stressful thoughts, mental, emotional stress. That is one category. But another category is toxins. That's chemical stresses. And chemical stresses can have an impact on our sleep as well. And they are burdening us. And then there's traumas that we're exposed to. And those could be big traumas that happen now and then. But each one of these categories, there's actually another way to think of it, which is that there are the macro stresses of these categories, and then there are micro stresses. So for mental, emotional stress, thoughts, again, there's the big stresses that happen, events that happen in our life, but then there's the chaos and disorganization and deadlines that are happening on a regular basis. That's the micro version of those stresses. And, for toxins, we might be exposed to mercury or lead or some, bad and environmental toxin, one event, or we could be eating an unhealthy diet. And so we're getting that chemical stress on an ongoing basis. Even a medication that's saving your life, it may come with chemical stresses as well. And then when we look at traumas, the physical category, there could be the macro traumas, a fall down the stairs, a work injury, a sports injury, a car accident, a slip or a fall. But then there's sedentary lifestyle, or doing something repeatedly with poor posture, use of devices, and our posture that we get into that. Those are the micro levels of traumas that are in that physical category that are stressful. So all of these are things that accumulate over time, and they just start to ramp up our stress levels over time. So again, if you think of Paleolithic man, what was the environment that our genes were designed for? And we're going to actually unpack that and look at how can we apply those concepts in the modern world. I'm going to give you some great tips on that. So we are living in very unnaturally modern life. It's awesome. And it is incredibly divergent or different from what we are designed for. That's the problem. So it's awesome that we have all the conveniences that we have, but we do not eat the way we were designed to eat. We do not move the way we were designed to move. We don't think the way we're designed to think. And we definitely do not sleep the way we were designed to sleep. Modern life is unnatural, but more specifically, it's unnaturally stressful. And so, you know, when we think of like the impact on sleep with all of the stresses that we have, right, that's what is piling things on. And so let's now look at what let's look at the cycles of sleep, and we'll start to look at how important it is to try to get back to the natural ways that we should be sleeping. So this is just going back to like the genetic design that we have. So there we go. So sun, eat, sleep. That's the rhythms of the day. And so the pituitary and the pineal glands are glands that are in the middle of our heads, and they actually do respond to light. And so when they respond to light, they will then secrete some hormones that will get us revved up and going for the day. The corticosteroids are for activity, and they will change our, our appetite, our activity levels, our body temperature, all kinds of things will change from that. And then when the light goes away, we send a message down, and we should be turning those corticosteroids off, the corticoids, we should be turning them down so that melatonin can be secreted coming back up again. So the autonomic nervous system is one of the things we use to manage the organs based on a clock. And that clock is based on cycles of light. So it's just a primal design that light will impact sleep, will impact hormones, will impact function, and that there are natural cycles of light and sleep that go together because they will impact our hormones. And so all of this should be working together. Yeah. So if we unpack this a little bit more and look at those cycle here, now what we're looking at here is a 24-hour clock, not a 12-hour clock, but a 24-hour clock. So you see midnight at the top, and you see noon at the bottom, right? And so early mornings halfway across here, and then supper time is halfway to midnight. Okay, so you can see this is a 24-hour clock. And so there's certain things that should be happening as we go around the clock. So for example, let's just start at sunrise at 6 a.m. This is when there should be a sharp increase in our blood pressure, because we are getting ready to get up and do our day. And so we want to increase the pressure so that we can get the blood out to the muscles and we can just start moving. Melatonin secretion is going to stop once we get that full light of day coming in, and we'll have the highest level of alertness typically around 10 a.m. Then high noon hits, and then we'll have our best coordination right around 2:30, our fastest reaction time around 3:30. So you might be wondering, why is it that it works this way? Here, greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength is right around 5 p.m. So why would that be? Well, of course, Paleolithic man is going to wake up in the morning, and now it's time to go out for the hunt so we can get food for the day. And so you're going to be alert, tracking where are the animals, and you're going to be tracking them. And now you're going to have to be running and chasing and aiming and shooting, and not shooting with guns, but with arrows or spears, or, you're going to be using the strategies that you have in order to take down that kill for the day, which is going to then feed the family and feed the tribe. And so you come back to the tribal place, the cave, right? And your blood pressure you're going to have the sharpest rise here, but then here, highest blood pressure, highest body temperature. It's kind of getting us ready to now lay down, and melatonin secretion is going to start. Melatonin is what then helps us to drift into sleep. And then our deepest sleep happens at 2 a.m. Our lowest body temperature is here at 4:30 a.m. And then we get ready to rise again. So there is this light and hormonal rhythms and cycles, and the melatonin and the cortisol are the hormones that will impact what our activities are. So cortisol starts to show up, and it is what increases the blood pressure as the melatonin drops. And it's the high cortisol levels that keep us active throughout the day. And then those cortisol levels should be shutting down right around here. And then the melatonin starts. And that's what helps us to get that deep sleep that we need. So a restful night, we should have sleep cycles that are 90 minutes in length. And so we want to have those normal sleep cycles, and that helps our brain get into the right brain waves. So we should have high alpha brainwave states. And that's when we kind of go into that twilight state between waking and sleeping. And then gently, we then slow down the brain to a deep delta for deep sleep. And then finally, we slightly elevate the brainwave frequencies when we are triggering the rapid eye movement dreaming sleep state. So there's different brain waves that we go through as well. Let's now look at that natural cortisol cycle. So here we are at noon, where cortisol levels are high, and then they should be dropping as the day goes on. Until midnight, they should be very low, and melatonin should be high. So if we were looking at a melatonin wave, it would be the opposite. Melatonin would be high here, and then it would start to drop. And so here we see cortisol starts to come up around 6 a.m. We have a sharp increase, and then it stays high for the day. And then we can see, heading towards 6 p.m. That we start to now drop it down again. So this is the natural cycles of cortisol. And there are some people that they get into trouble with cortisol because they actually stay in a stressed state. And I just want to look at, I want to see if I'm going to talk about, we're going to talk about this now. So when we look at these cycles, there are ways that you can measure what your cortisol levels are. And so what we see happening is that people will not be active enough during the day. So their cortisol levels might come up, but then they don't really peak because they're sedentary. They're not really active enough during the day. And so they go along, and then when it's time to go to sleep, their body is not physically tired. And so that's one of the factors that can interfere with sleep, is if you don't have panting and sweating exercise. And then they just start to think about their stresses of the day, and they're worried about those stresses. And so the worry actually keeps the cortisol levels high, because that's the stress hormone. And so we have some people who their cortisol levels, instead of going down and up in a cycle, they just kind of stay steady all the time, which means they're not getting good sleep, and they don't have good energy during the day either. And so looking at the cortisol cycles can be one of the ways that we can uncover if somebody's gone sideways with that. Let's now look at whoops, here we go. Let's do that. And so again, this is just looking at things that happen as our pituitary gland is signaling to our body things it needs to do at different cycles during the day. So when we're sleeping is also when we're secreting growth hormone, which is what we need to stimulate cell repair, cell growth, cell generation. It has big impacts on our mood and cognition because of the effects it has on neuronal health, the nervous system health, and other hormonal pathways. So sleep is actually the most powerful anti-aging cellular regeneration treatment in the world. Just getting good sleep, because it promotes growth hormone, which is going to affect muscle growth. It's going to help with our organs so that they are functioning properly. It's going to help with bone growth. So if you're concerned about osteoporosis, right, bone growth is going to be stimulated with this growth hormone, again, which is going to be dependent on us having healthy sleep. So when our cortisol, what are our cortisol levels for? They actually are a self-promoting mechanism that produces more stress hormones, so you can't sleep. So when your cortisol levels are high and you're in a stress state, it just actually keeps that hormone production going as you're thinking and worrying when you should be sleeping. Cortisol and melatonin also controls your sodium levels. So when it's downregulated, this would actually hold the sodium levels so that the blood pressure will go up when it's time for you to get up in the morning and have that increase. But cortisol levels also are going to downregulate insulin, and that's going to cause blood sugar to go up. And so if you think about this, the reason that we would have that is that if your cortisol level is high, it is equated to being in stress mode. So think about if a tiger is going to be chasing you, what do you want your body to be doing in that moment, right? You want to actually, it's not a good time to sleep. If a tiger's chasing you, you want blood pressure to increase so that you get the blood out to the muscles so that you can run and fight. You're going to downregulate the insulin because we actually want high blood sugar when it's time to fight the tigers, because that is a fuel source that we can use immediately in the muscles. It's going to actually weaken connective tissues, high cortisol levels, which then breaks down the joints and soft tissues. It makes you wrinkled and saggy. So you're sick, tired, and wrinkled, right? That's what happens with the connective tissues. And then the immune system is also downregulated because the immune system is such a expensive system to run that when it's time to fight the tiger, your body basically just says, hey, let's just put that on hold. So all of our resources go to fight or flight right now. And then in 15 minutes, when we're done with the tiger, then we're going to need that immune system to be strong. So we'll crank it up then. But right now, we're going to downregulate it. And then inflammation and swelling actually will go up with high cortisol again, because if you do get wounded, this is the initial pathways that we use to actually heal a wound. So our body's actually getting ready for that. But if our cortisol levels are chronically elevated, the things that cause that are limited exertion, not enough panting and sweating exercise. It's also caused by chronic psychological stress, and it's caused by sleep deprivation. So when we don't get enough sleep, we crank up our cortisol levels. And if our cortisol levels get out of that rhythmic sync and they start to just go right along, that's also going to interfere with our sleep, right? So you can see how this is a cycle that can actually get itself set up so that now you're having trouble with sleep, even when you want to be sleeping. So this is going to affect a number of different things when we have chronically elevated cortisol. And so I'm going to just show you on the next page here how it relates, but I want you to be watching for, and I want you to be thinking right now, could chronically elevated cortisol affect hunger? Could it affect fat storage? Could it affect how well you are adapting to stresses? Could it affect your energy? And could it affect your brain? This is what we're going to look at. So lack of sleep actually causes parts of your brain to slow or shut down completely. And that starts to affect our function. So math and logic can be affected in the neocortex, that smart part of our brain. That's where memory and learning happens. Also in the parietal lobe, that's actually the math and logic aspect. The frontal lobe is where we have creative thinking. That can be affected. Here's the prefrontal cortex. Yeah, judgment and visuals. And this is where our humanity lives. So if you're not getting enough sleep, sometimes you're not as compassionate to other human beings as you really could be. Sometimes your sense of humor kind of goes away. And that's because your prefrontal cortex is shutting down. And then the temporal lobe is where language is. So the effects of sleep deprivation are interesting, that when we go to sleep, our brain actually goes to the gym, because it's the time for the brain to actually get more active in order to integrate all the experiences that happen during the day, to sort them out and to put them in the right places for perspective for the future. Good and sleep is so important that it's kind of like, if somebody let's say somebody was just eating junk food all the time, and then they said, yeah, I'm just going to exercise so I can get healthier. Okay, you could exercise, but you better also improve your diet too. So good nutrition without good sleep is like good nutrition for couch potatoes, right? So the effects of sleep deprivation on neurocognitive functioning include affecting our attention, working memory, long-term memory, and decision-making. And if we have acute sleep deprivation, like usually we get good sleep, but just short-term, we just don't have a good night's sleep, just one night, it still is going to affect our attention, especially vigilance, and it will affect our long-term memory. Even acute sleep deprivation will affect our long-term memory. So let's look more closely at sleep deprivation here. So we have these unnatural schedules that are going to be affecting our cortisol cycles, that they're going to be upset by this. Melatonin is going to get downregulated, and insulin sensitivity is going to get downregulated. And one of the things that is causing this upset of our normal cycles is unnatural lighting. So I want to give you the example of a bear that's hibernating. They hibernate in the winter when they need to be using the fat that they stored. But in the summer, when there's a lot of light, that is the time for them to load on the fat. And so leptin is going to, that's the one that suppresses our appetite. That's the hormone that suppresses our appetite. So that says, yeah, I'm satiated, I've had enough. Well, when you have unnatural lighting, it's like the bear saying, oh, it's still light out. This is the time for me to keep adding fat here. And so your appetite actually will go up when you have the abnormal lighting, unnatural lighting. Ghrelin is the hormone that's kind of works yin yang with leptin. And so ghrelin is the appetite piece here. So when this happens, these are going to go sideways here. And so both of them, leptin is down, which is the satiation hormone, which is, say I've had enough, and that's going to cause appetite to be high. And then ghrelin is the appetite hormone, and that stays high here at the same time. Cortisol actually drives us to crave carbs more, because carbs are that fast fuel that we can use when we're fighting the tiger. So when we're stressed or have high cortisol levels, we'll tend to crave carbs. And then the insulin, which is downregulated, is used to take the blood sugar out of the blood and to then start storing it. And so we're going to have more and more blood sugar, which means that we're going to have to now move that and start storing it as fat. And missing one night's sleep, you can have the same blood profile as a pre-diabetic the next day, just from one night's sleep. And all of this can start to result in belly fat. So if we're constantly exposed to light, it confuses our physiology. And that leads to us actually acting like the bear all year round, where we just keep storing the fat more and more, just from unnatural lighting. And that leads to this belly fat. So if you think about it, when we look at this idea of chronic low-grade stress, our ancestors, again, let's think about this genetically. Our ancestors, they had short-term stresses, and plenty of them, weather, shelter, maybe warring tribes, where are we going to get food, the hunt, right? And competition for a mate, maybe those would be the short-term stresses that would come up. You would manage it, fighting off the tiger, and then the tiger goes away and you're all set. The storm passes, you're all set. The tribe, the warring tribe, either you win or you lose, but then that's done. The only chronic stress that our ancestors had was famine. That was the only chronic stress we had. And so genetically speaking, if we have a smart body that's designed to be healthy and we encounter famine, that smart body is going to say, okay, we need to store fat right now if there's a famine, because the ones that are really good at storing fat, those are the ones that are going to survive the famine. So genetically, there are some people, they just look at a cupcake and they gain weight, right? So genetically, they would be the ones that would survive. So there's a reason why that genetic trait would be passed down, because it actually has survival advantage. However, when we are encountering low-grade stresses that are chronic, genetically our cells say, oh, this must be a famine then. So when we have chronic things that we're worried about, or just the whole modern, unnatural, stressful life that we are surrounded by, that the culture just pushes us with, that is, the cells will interpret all of that as, oh, this must be a famine, so we better store fat. And so that will trigger storing the fat. Very specifically, it's that centripetal fat. It's the fat right around the belly, because you can still move around and go catch your game. You can still go hunting if you've got this tire around the middle here. So you don't, store that fat in your foot or in your arm, because you need to be still moving that foot and that arm in order to keep hunting. So this is the safest place to be storing fat that you can then use. And so can you imagine if your solution to unwanted body fat was simply getting better sleep? Like, how great news is that? So let's now look at the effects of sleep deprivation. Again, we've done some of these as well, but I think it's interesting, some of the other ones that show up here. So again, cognitive impairment, memory lapses or loss, impaired moral judgment, severe yawning, hallucinations, and symptoms similar to ADHD. How many people are actually getting diagnosed with an ADHD and the medications that come with it when actually they just need better sleep? It impairs the immune system, the risk of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, increased heart rate variability with increased risk of heart disease, increased reaction time, decreased accuracy, tremors, aches in the muscles, growth suppression, risk of obesity, decreased temperature in the body as well. And so remember, the number one cause of all of this sleep deprivation is voluntary sleep deprivation. It's crazy. So let's look at what the best practices are here. First, use the circadian rhythm as a guide. So when the sun goes down, time to start thinking about going to sleep. When the sun comes up, time to wake up. And if we use that as our guide, then we're going to be closest to the natural rhythms that our body genetically demands in order to be healthy. We want to be looking at 8 to 9 hours of good sleep. And it is interesting that historically, before the light bulb was developed, people on average would sleep 9 hours a day. And then as soon as the light bulb was introduced in our culture, we went to 8 hours a day as what the normal is. And now that we've added screens to our culture, the normal, not healthy normal, but commonly people are down to more like 6 hours of sleep that they're getting as like an average. And so some people use devices like the Fitbit or the Oura Ring or Garmin, I think has one. And so the Apple Watch, right? Different ways for you to be measuring what is happening in your biology and to see, am I actually getting those 8 to 9 hours of good sleep? The room you want to use, you want it to be dark, quiet, and comfortable. Think of a cave where all the lights go out, the fire burns down, and now it's dark. And we want it to be really dark when we are sleeping. So none of those little lights from your digital alarm clock or, the computer that's on in the corner that has the little lights to it. You definitely want to get rid of all those lights, block them up so that they don't show up. And then there are other things that you can do to help to induce sleep. So essential oils can be used. Lavender is a good one. Orange, chamomile, sage. These are all very useful essential oils that can help to promote sleep. And then this whole idea of an e-fast. So an e-fast refers to electronics or screens, monitors. And so we want to limit that because there is blue light that comes from these screens. And the blue light is like daylight. And so it actually gets, it diminishes the melatonin, suppresses the melatonin, and it increases the cortisol because the body thinks, oh, it's still daylight, so I'm still active. And so it disrupts those hormone levels. So if you are somebody that, I like to talk to families about this, about what are some of the tools that you can do that you can think about the whole family. And one fun thing to do, and maybe not this time of the year you're thinking because it's getting darker earlier, but a fun thing to do is to see what it's like to just not turn any lights on. Maybe use candles instead. So candlelight is actually different. It emits an orange light, but the screens as well as the LED lights that are bright, they are daylight wavelengths that are coming at us. So just having candlelight and seeing what that's like, or making sure that we have no overhead lights on, only lamps that are down low on. Those are good practices. And then the e-fast is the idea of before you're going to sleep, at least 30 minutes before you sleep. And for some people, they really have to just turn the screens off 90 minutes before they're going to go to sleep. Now, one way to help manage this, if you really cannot avoid the screen time before you go to sleep, or if you have all the lights in your house are LED lights and you just want to be able to move around, you're not ready to do the candles yet, there is a piece that you can do, which is to use safety glasses or blue light blockers. And I'm just going to grab a pair that I have here. You can get all kinds of fancy ones. These are a little bit fancier. So I already feel my body just relax the second that I put these on. I can feel it. And so if you've ever used them, you'll start to notice it yourself. But you can actually even get these just like cheap safety glasses, Uvex safety eyewear. And it's just these the kinds of things that you get that workers use when they are wanting to protect their eyes, you know, just these kind of goggles. But you want to get the ones that are yellow. And so in our house, if we don't have our fancy ones, we've got these lying around everywhere. We just put them on. When the sun goes down, we've got these on. My daughter and I in our house, that's what we do. My daughter's at college now. She's got her blue light blockers with her at college as well, because we've trained her early on, like this is the significance of it all. So using the safety glasses, if you don't have a pair of these already, let me know, because we usually have a bunch of them in the office and we're about to order some more. So I can give you one when you come in if you'd like one. Another best practice is going to be looking at alcohol use. Some people will use alcohol as a way to try and, you know, chill out and turn the stress switch off. But alcohol actually does interfere with the normal hormonal cycle. And although you could probably, you know, pass out from too much alcohol, that's not going to be a good strategy for getting good sleep. You want to not have to rely on the alcohol. And of course, caffeine is going to keep you alert, keep the adrenals, the cortisol levels higher. So limiting the caffeine to earlier in the day. Caffeine has a lot of health benefits associated with it, but it can be one of the things that disturbs sleep. And so thinking about that. Now, household culture, I think, is also important to talk about here, because it's a little tricky when in your house you've got a morning glory and a night owl in the same house, so that one person is going to bed really late and the other person is waking up really early. So try to get your household culture to be one where you're all in the same rhythm. Those are what the best practices are. So let's see, drink your alcohol earlier in the day, sleep more. Exercise is important. So you can see how, these are all best practices that can help you with your sleep. So we can just get on with it here. All right, so now let's look at, again, the synopsis here. So a few more pieces. Staying away from foods that disrupt sleep. So for some people, they feel like they have indigestion if they eat too late at night. So looking at the last meal 2 hours before sleep, or just eating lightly if it's late. And then other foods may require heavier digestion. And so that can actually interfere with your sleep. Supplements that can help to bridge the gap. So Magnolia seems to help with that. There's a product called Setitol that I've used in the past with folks. Orchex is the building blocks that we need for managing stress better. Minchex is also, these are both mineral blends and Mintrans. So these are a variety that I test people on to see which one is the best fit for them. Antronex is kind of like an antihistamine, a natural one. So that actually can be useful for some people, and I test them for that. And then things like chamomile, valerian, poppy, those are all useful. Magnesium, I have found, is a really important one for folks. And there's different types of magnesium that are out there. I find that most people are kind of getting the economical forms of magnesium. It's magnesium oxide, which is not as useful to the body. The magnesiums that end in ATE are kind of the ones you want to be looking at. And there's one that I have that seems to test, there's two that actually that I have that test very strong for people. One is called Easy Mag, and the other one is Complete MG, because it has a blend of 3. And also interesting that magnesium, the Complete MG, has threonate, glycinate, and I can't remember what the third one is, but that combination of those 3 is the one that has the biggest impact, the biggest prevention of damage from 5G. So 5G will actually affect our health of our body. And, you know, we're talking about screens and that sort of things. So EMF in the house. So you want to unplug if you have wireless in the house, you want to unplug that while you're sleeping, because the EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, can actually disturb your sleep. But again, the magnesium, by the way, is vitamin D and magnesium are the ways to help your body reconcile the wireless that's all around us in the 5G. Tryptophan is found in different foods. People associate it with turkey, and why you feel sleepy on Thanksgiving because of eating all that turkey, which has a lot of tryptophan. That can actually help with sleep. And then many people are finding CBD being very useful, or hemp oils being useful. And I test people on that. And I've been given a lot of different CBD samples, and we're going gangbusters here in Vermont with the availability of these things. But I do like to test people, because there are a couple that I've found that are really good, that test strong for a lot of people. And then most of the others, they don't test strong at all for people. So at least if you have one, bring it in, we can test it and see if it'll be useful. And then chaste tree, interesting, chaste tree is what creates the building blocks for melatonin. And so rather than taking melatonin itself, which there's some controversy around whether or not taking melatonin is a good practice. And so chaste tree is the building blocks for that. So that I find is test strong for people. Kava is another one that can test strong for people, that helps to kind of turn the stress switch off, that think that people can get into that can disturb their sleep. Omega-3s at optimum levels also will provide resilience to sleep deprivation. So that is what we use for making our hormones for all of our cell membranes, and our brain needs really good omega-3s. When we sleep, our brain, the brain cells actually shrink, so that the fluid that bathes the nervous system and bathes the brain can kind of get in between the cells and clear out toxins that have accumulated during the day. So when we go to sleep, the brain shrinks, and it washes the brain with the cerebrospinal fluid. When we don't get enough sleep, we can now have toxins building up. And so not that I'm going to promote, sleep deprivation, and then all you need is activated charcoal. But if there are times when you're not getting good sleep, then taking activated charcoal is a way to get some of the toxins cleared out that have accumulated, so they don't keep building up. And more best practices include sound therapy, white noise, nature sounds, or earplugs, right? If the sounds are too loud, then using earplugs to block the sound if it's disturbing your sleep is a good way to go. And then other people will actually have white noise going, which actually can be, for some people, very soothing, especially people that struggle with tinnitus, ringing in the ears. White noise machines can actually override that, so that they can actually get some good sleep. Now, vigorous exertion no later than 4 hours before bed typically is the rule. And when we say vigorous exertion, we mean panting and sweating exercise. So we want to be getting that in sometime during the day. And it's best to do it every day, because that's what gets your body physically tired, so that when it's time to go to sleep, your body wants to go to sleep. When we don't get enough vigorous exertion, we don't turn the stress switch off, and it leaves the cortisol levels high. And then we're just thinking and worrying instead of being fatigued enough from physical exercise to put us into sleep. I have had a lot of people get great results with EFT tapping. So that's the emotional freedom technique, learning to tap on the endpoints of acupuncture meridians in order to turn the stress switch off. So there have been times when I'm lying awake at night thinking, I'm not sleeping. I think I'm going to do some tapping right now. And so I just do a couple rounds of tapping and then I can feel myself drifting away. I used to use that with my daughter when she was young. If she was not falling asleep easily, we'd just go do a few tapping. Within 5 minutes, she'd be asleep. I do want to let you know that here in the office, twice a month, every other week, we have Kim Guidry coming in right now to do EFT group classes. And so the next one will be in a couple of weeks on a Tuesday. So if you can join us for that, you're welcome to come. And finally, jet lag acupuncture. So how do you deal with jet lag? So there are acupuncture points that you can use where every organ in the body, according to Chinese medicine, is active at certain times during that whole 24-hour cycle. So the liver may be active at one point in time, and then the gallbladder, and then the stomach, and so on. And there are points, acupuncture points around your body that coordinate, that match up with certain organs. So there's a jet lag acupuncture technique where you will get on the plane and then you look at what time is it in the next place where I'm headed in my destination. And so if it's, 4 hours ahead, then you're going to look on the acupuncture chart, and I can give you a chart of this when you come in. You look on the chart of what organ is active in your destination place, and then you're going to stimulate that point that goes with that organ for a couple of minutes, and then 2 hours later you go to the next organ. So the organ's focus changes every 2 hours as you go around the clock. And so by the time you get to your destination, you actually have tuned your body to actually be in that time zone. And then I do find there are times when melatonin can be useful on a short-term basis that I am excited for people to use, and that is for when you're traveling and you have to get into a different cycle fast. So eating chocolate to keep yourself a little bit more alert when you really want to go to sleep, but you're in a different time zone. And then when it's time to sleep in that time zone, but you're not sleepy, using the melatonin for that. So those are some ways to manage jet lag more effectively. So now let's look at the sleep issues: sleep apnea, thoracic outlet, restless leg. Remember that the nervous system is the master system, as we said. And so the nervous system, we have the brain and the spinal cord, and then we have the peripheral nerves, which carry the messages from the brain out to the body. So they exit from in between the bones of the spine. You can see where the nerves are coming out between the bones. And so, as I said before, the brain controls everything. As long as the messages get out and back without interference, you get to be healthy, because the brain has messages going out to control the organs. And then the organs have messages to tell the brain about what's going on. Now the brain gets the accurate information about what's going on. And now it's going to send information back out to fine-tune things. So if we have distorted information going up to the brain because we have subluxations in the spine, the brain does not get an accurate picture of what's happening in the environment, in the body. And so its response may be inappropriate. So the idea of garbage in, garbage out. And if you think of the spine like a fuse box or a circuit breaker, we know that the wires in the house are the wires from the circuit breaker go out to certain rooms in the house. And if there's a break in the circuit, then that whole room is not working. The appliances aren't working, the light bulbs aren't working. Well, if you ever walked into your house and you found a room where nothing was working, you don't waste a second on testing the light bulbs, you just go right to the power source. So when someone comes to see us with any kind of health concern, the first thing a chiropractor's job is to go to the power source and look to see if there's any subluxations or nerve interference in the spine. Now, there are certain subluxation patterns that will correlate with different sleep issues. And so I want to show you that. But the big idea is that the brain controls everything. It has to get the messages out. The body is self-healing and self-regulating, but it has to have a good, clear nervous system in order to do that. And if there's interference in the nervous system, you're going to have a breaking down in function. And if you can clear that nerve interference to regain the healthy connections between the brain and the body, then we're going to expect improved function over time. And that when you have stresses that accumulate over time, those are the things that result in the subluxations or the short circuits. The same way that a circuit breaker, it only blows if there's an overload to the system. It's never random. There's always a reason. And so subluxations are caused by these stresses that our body's not adapting to. So a subluxation is when there's a misalignment of the vertebrae, the joints misalign, it causes soft tissue damage, that causes local inflammation and nerve irritation. That then leads to spasming of the muscles around that area as your smart body wants to just lock that joint down to stop irritating the nerve, and that fixates the joint. Now, when a joint is fixated, usually with movement in the joint, it's going to send signaling up to the brain through the mechanoreceptors to tell the brain what's going on. So the way the brain gets feedback of where the body is in space is through movement. So even if I don't look at my finger, I know where it is, and I can point to things without seeing where I'm pointing, because all the joints as they're moving are sending mechanoreceptor signals to the brain. So I know exactly where my body is in space. If we have joint fixation that strapped that joint down, so that joint is no longer moving, it no longer is sending what we call proprioceptive signals to the brain. The mechanoreceptors are not firing because there's no movement there. And when that happens, the brain kind of starts to go into stress mode of, wait, what's going on down there? Kind of like if you're in a crowd and you have your child or your grandchild with you and suddenly they disappear, like, where are they? Where are they? And you go into stress mode, right? If the brain stops getting proprioceptive input, it gets concerned, like what's going on down there? And it increases stress hormones in the body. So cortisol levels will go up when you have subluxations, and that can then drive that lowered melatonin, and that can interfere with sleep, that you just have these subluxations that are interfering with having the normal sleep cycles of hormones. Now let's look at if somebody struggles with sleep apnea, and you know what I mean by this, like if you've got that Uncle Fred, every time he comes over to visit and he drinks beer and eats pizza and then he goes to sleep, he's got that snoring. And with sleep apnea, if you know this, you've heard it, right? There's breathing, and then there's kind of snoring, and then all of a sudden there's no breathing sounds at all. That person stopped breathing. And then suddenly there's a snort and they start breathing again. And so if you're next to them, it is very disturbing to, if you're not able to just sleep yourself, to just hear that irregular rhythm. They stop breathing. When are they going to start breathing again? So it can be disruptive, not just to the person with the sleep apnea, but the family that also is living with them. So what happens with sleep apnea is we can get inflammation, which can create narrowing of the sinuses. And if you have obesity, it's going to compound that. The other thing that's going to affect it is a loss of the cervical curve. So when you lose the proper curve in the neck, that actually can affect the soft palate and the nerves that go up to that area that hold the integrity of that area. And so if you have these things and now you lay down, gravity is going to go after that tissue that has lost integrity. And it actually then starts to create a more turbulent airflow in the whole soft palate area. And that's what results in the snoring and the sleep apnea, where it actually closes off the airway. And the correlation with sleep apnea and heart disease and stroke is the same as the correlation between obesity and these things. And both of these can be compounded by subluxations. So, you know, when we think of sleep apnea, really, is this the only way? There's got to be a better way than using a machine to help you to sleep. I mean, think about our ancestors, right? They never would have needed a machine to help them sleep. So this is just an example of how we've normalized how sideways our sleep has gotten. I want to show you the subluxation patterns that we normally find. And so with people that have sleep apnea, we definitely will need to do some coaching on inflammatory foods. So reducing inflammatory foods, increasing supplements that reduce inflammation, getting their weight down with healthier diet and lifestyle, those kinds of things. and getting that healthy cervical curve. And the areas of subluxation that we typically find are going to be the C1 area here at the very top of the spine, C1 to C3, that's the brainstem level. And then also C6 to C7, and that's the nerve supply that controls a lot of things to do with respiration, that kind of thing. So that area, and I think of it as a chemical stress because inflammation definitely has a big impact. So just like, you know, Uncle Charlie, who it's especially when he has the beer and the pizza that his snoring gets really bad, right? And that's because those are inflammatory foods. So if we can reduce the inflammatory foods which cause swelling of the tissues, then that actually can reduce the subluxation reoccurrences in this area as well. Thoracic outlet syndrome is where you toss and turn because you just can't get comfortable during the night. And that's because of the thoracic spine here. So tossing and turning at night due to pain and muscle soreness, surely that can interfere with sleep. It can make you restless and wake you up. You just can't find a comfortable position. And so I want you to understand how this works here. So the spinal cord, you can see this white part here, it's pretty thick as it comes out of the brain because it's got all the nerve, the wires, you could say, the nerve fibers that eventually are going to be distributed and branch off all the way down the spine. So as they branch off, the spinal cord gets thinner and thinner, but at the very top, it's very thick. And it's still thick even in this thoracic area. And yet the holes where the nerves come through, these thoracic vertebrae are smaller and the lumbar vertebrae are very big, but the thoracic ones are smaller. And so you have this bigger spinal cord that is coming through the smaller vertebrae. So this is the narrowest part of the neural canal, and it's the least tolerant of inflammation. So you're going to be more symptomatic here. You'll tend to be more symptomatic here if you have increased inflammation. So innately, the body's going to toss and turn, twisting to try and open the foramina to relieve the pressure on the nerve and increase the room in the IVF, which is the place where the nerve exits to go out to the peripheral nervous system, to go out to the organs. And so it is interesting that when we have restlessness or moving, if we have pain, movement will tend to override. So the mechanoreceptors of movement will override the pain receptors. Do you ever notice that if you bang your thumb or you injure your thumb, like, oh, you shake it as a way to instantly, without even thinking about it, try to deal with it. And that shaking is movement, and it's overriding the pain signaling that happens. So if we have discomfort in this area, we'll be more restless, tossing and turning, because it's a way for us to try to turn the pain signals off. And that, again, is going to interfere with good sleep. So with thoracic problems, usually it's going to be the T5 to T9. And I think of this as a physical stress where we perhaps have poor posture. We are using devices and screens, we're slumping, and so that can actually increase the subluxations in this area from physical stresses, sedentariness. Now, finally, we can look at restless leg syndrome. So this is going to tend to be more the lumbar or lumbopelvic nerve irritation, because the subluxations in the lumbar spine are what control the legs. And so pain signals actually will move at a slow twitch. So when we send the signal, when there's pain in the muscles, the pain signal is a slow twitch signal. The movement of a muscle is a fast twitch signal. And so the body's going to move to try and override the pain signal. So this is going to be true in the restless leg syndrome as well. And so it turns out that before you experience pain, you have to fire a nerve a certain number of times, and then you will perceive it as pain. But if you're firing it below the pain level, the body is still looking at that slow twitch signaling that's moving towards pain, and you'll actually get restless legs where you just need to move that leg around because it's your body's way of trying to to reconcile the same fibers that eventually are going to be sending pain signals. So the areas of subluxation are going to tend to be down here. We think of this as a neurological stress. And so this is the part where L4 and 5 is the nerves that go right down into the legs, as well as the sacrum. It affects the nerves that go down into the legs. So remember that when you have subluxations, they cause nerve irritation and interference in your body's innate ability to heal and remain healthy. And remaining healthy includes having healthy sleep. And so when things like losing the curve in the spine and degenerative changes, those are signs of prolonged subluxations, uncorrected subluxations, and those are what can then interfere even more with the flow of messages between the brain and the body. The causes of subluxation are the accumulation of bad habits, jarring of the spine, and life happening that add together and accumulate over time. So again, remember, it tends to be the micro stresses that are the biggest problem rather than the one-off events that happen now and then. So bad habits, sitting, tech stress, tech neck, that kind of thing. Because over time, when we don't have good posture, that is a micro stress that leads to more stress in the spine, which then leads to more subluxation. So if we have great posture, the head, that may weigh 12 pounds, is right over the center of gravity, balanced there. But as soon as the head goes out in front, it actually increases the amount of work that the body has to do. So now it has to do 32 pounds of work as it goes forward. And the further forward it goes, now the body has to do 42 pounds of work. The same way as if you hold a bowling ball close, and if you start to hold it out in front of you, you're going to work harder and harder. So you have this bowling ball head right at the top of the spine that we want to have great posture. And that literally can affect great sleep. Because as this goes forward and we have more and more subluxations, we're going to have higher and higher cortisol levels that'll then continue to cause more and more distressed sleep. I had a patient who came in, and he came in very specifically because he was having all kinds of pain and so on in his back, his upper back, and he knew it was because of his posture. It was affecting his sleep. And he was actually going into depression because he had been just trying to live around it for so long, and it was affecting everything, his mood and everything. And so once he got under care, we literally could see his posture analysis where his body just picked up over time. And he just raved about the great sleep that he would get once we started to correct the subluxations, improve the posture, turning the cortisol levels off. And one time he said, "Man, I slept like Dracula last night." He said it was such a deep, deep sleep that he had. So how do we correct subluxations? We have adjustments in a rhythm so that we can have the accumulation of healthy alignment in the spine. We have breaking the bad habits, how you eat, how you move, and how you think. And we've gone over those habits relating to sleep. And then exercises to strengthen the spine. So exercise not just for burst exertion to get you panting and sweating, but very specific spinal exercises to get your spine healthier. And one of the things that I want to just cover before we close up is sleep positions. I realize that I haven't covered that in the past with my sleep workshop, but that's a very common question that people have is, what are the best positions for sleeping? And so remember that when we look at the spine, there should be some forward curves in the neck and a forward curve at the waist. So we want to actually recreate that when we go to sleep. And so I like to encourage people to just do an exercise before they sleep where they sit on the bed and they turn their spine, rotating it back and forth. And when you turn it back and forth about 20 times, it gets the discs in the spine malleable, so that they can be molded. And then in order to reconcile the fact that a lot of people are on devices and losing the curves in the spine, we want to remold that spine. And so we actually have towels that we have people lie on before they go to sleep to remold the spine. So you can just take a bath towel, and then when you roll it up, you're going to roll it up so that it is I have rubber bands around this just to keep it that way. But when you roll it up, you'll see that there's a space in the middle here where you fold it in on either side, and then there's a space in the middle. And the space in the middle is there to cradle your spine so that you're going to lie on the towel with your spine right in the middle of that towel. And then you're just going to lie down on the floor and wait 20 minutes, and it helps to start to remold the spine. The discs will harden up in a healthier shape. So before you go to sleep, you want to prepare your spine for sleep by doing that exercise. And then when it is time to go to sleep, you want to be reinforcing that forward curve. So sleeping on your back with the proper pillow in order to support your neck. Or if you sleep on your side, which is also acceptable, but you want your spine to be supported with enough height so that your spine is straight. So if you have too small of a pillow, then your spine is going to be crooked. If you have too big of a pillow, then your spine is going to be crooked. And so you want it to be just like Goldilocks. You want it to be just right. Okay, so sleeping on your back or on your side are both acceptable, but you want to keep in mind, what are the healthy biomechanics in the spine? Do I have a good support of my neck forward curve? And then from the side, is my neck straight? There is a pillow that some of my colleagues developed. It's called the Proper Pillow. And I love it because it actually has, within the pillow itself, it has these dowels that are supporting the neck. So there's a dowel right in there that supports the proper curve in the neck. And so when you're sleeping on the pillow, you can see how some pillows are going to reverse that curve, but the Proper Pillow actually reinforces that healthy curve. So as far as sleep goes, that. So usually sleeping on your stomach, you want to avoid, because you'll tend to have your head cranked to one side, and that actually will sometimes straighten the neck. If you can pull it off, you want to just, if you remember that tipping the head up, if you're on your belly, and actually it's best to just have one leg up and one arm up, so you're not just completely on your belly and with your head turned. So best practice is going to be on your back or on your side as far as the positions for sleep. And so if you have improper sleep positions, that can also be a stress that causes subluxation. So how do you know if you have a subluxation? There's 5 criteria that we use in the office to measure that. We use scanning technology that the astronauts use that measures whether or not you have nerve interference in the nerves that go to the muscles, the nerves that go to the organs. We also look at how well you're managing the stresses that you're under, so we can literally see if you are dominating in stress mode, and then we know we better address that as well and help you with that. We use motion palpation to see if any of the vertebral joints are locked down, strapped down, the way that does happen with subluxations. So that's how we can identify the subluxation. And even just static palpation, just feeling, is the vertebra misaligned, and feeling that it's out of alignment. We'll use visualization, do a posture analysis to see, do you carry your head forward, or is your brain tracking where your body's in space accurately? And then x-rays can tell us how long a problem has been there, whether there's any degenerative change, and we can literally show you whether you have the loss of curves in the spine or lateral curves and that sort of thing. And then we'll know what we need to do to make recommendations for you to see if we can help. So if you can't sleep, get adjusted, and that way you'll sleep well. And that way you won't be a depleted battery during the day. You can power up that battery so that you are fully charged. All right. So, and again, sleep should be trumping everything. It is the king when it comes to best practices for lifestyle. Sleep should trump everything. It should be the most important thing that you're looking at, because these days, people are not looking at it enough. So I hope that you found that this was helpful, and I'm going to end our recording now. And thank you so much for your time.